Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Money Matters Top Tips for Success, where each and every day I bring on new business owners, entrepreneurs, and executives and have them share their top tips for success with you. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres to keep up with my releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, moneymatterstoptips.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today I have Renee on the line, and she's the President and Creative Director over at the Miller Group. Renee, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Adam. Nice to be here.
So I'm excited to get more into what you're doing over at the Miller Group and how you're helping your clients. But before we do that, let's get a little bit further into your background. So how did you get started in your career and in business?
So as a young child or teenager, I would help my dad out. He was an entrepreneur, and he had his own business. And I used to go in and help him out with things and learned, he always kind of envisioned me becoming an entrepreneur as well. And we have a lot of family members who are entrepreneurs. And so that's kind of how it got started.
I love it. So it was in your blood. You didn't, whether you knew it or not at the time, you didn't have a choice. It was in your blood, and it was the route you were going and being groomed for. I love it. And you also had influences around you that could obviously provide advice. That being said, there's also a segment of our audience that's younger, or maybe they're not necessarily younger in age, but they're younger in their entrepreneurial career. So maybe they had, a successful corporate career and they're thinking about creating their own business, or many different examples, or maybe it's a second career. That being said, you're many years into your business, over 30 years in business over at the Miller Group doing great work. What kind of advice would you give to that person that's really just getting started with their first entrepreneurial adventure?
I would tell them to go for it. There are people who always say, well, the timing might not be right, or, I'm making a lot of money in my current career. So just go for it. There's no great time to do it. You just if you have a burning passion, do it. And for those people who have these wonderful careers where they're concerned about losing their incomes, try it on the side. But do something. Take action. Life goes by way too quickly, and all you really have is a dream. And if you don't, the difference between the successful entrepreneurs and those who aren't is just the tenacity to follow and do what you believe in your heart. That's what I would really say.
Man, that's great advice, and I think it's true, because you can't without action. I mean, I've been in the same situation where you hear somebody say that they want to do something, and it's like 5 years later, 10 years later, it's like, man, how did where'd those 10 years go? I don't know, but it's a thing, and for the people listening, I know they know that also. Renee, I want to switch it up a bit. Let's get a little bit more into what you're doing over at the Miller Group. So first, tell me a little bit more about the business, please.
So I started it in 1990 as a traditional advertising agency, and Adam, as you know, traditional advertising is kind of tanked. So now it's more about social and branding, and really most important is clients want results. They want to know, how are you going to get me more bottom line? How are you going to get me more sales? How are you going to get me more brand recognition? And so really the tools may have changed, not doing as much traditional media placement, but the strategy and the tactics are still the same. And we always start every engagement with voice of the customer research. It's really critical. A lot of times today, clients are very tactical. They say, I needed this, I need that, and we say, why do you think that is? And ultimately, it's getting down to what will work best for those clients to get them the sales they need, to get them the branding, to get them the attention. And there are a lot of more tools, but the bottom line is the strategy is still the same way of reaching customers and listening most important, listening to what the consumer has to say about your product or service, and then taking that to heart and really figuring out. Sometimes it has nothing to do with marketing. Sometimes it has to do with just internally modifying a product or changing operations. Maybe pricing is off. So consumer research really helps to clients better understand their products and services.
I love your vantage point, because you come from the traditional advertising background also, but now you obviously understand the importance of digital and everything else. And that being said, a lot of people didn't make that transition, I would argue, from the prior, we'll say, advertising regime, if you will. That being said, I think you do have a unique vantage point. And what I always go back to is I always say the art of telling the story has not changed. I mean, that's thousands of years old. Like we get into, at this point in time, different channels and the new technology and other things are obviously new ways of presenting a product and or idea. But once upon a time, there were people in forums singing, telling their idea, or another, go further back, there's somebody, people on the side of a mountain talking about their products or their ideas or the market. It's still fundamentally the same. Could you talk a little bit more about your concept or your thought process on storytelling?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because we just today sent out a blog post on Ralph Lauren, the man and the company, and because his new the documentary just came out called Very Very Ralph, and this is a brand that's 50 years old, and they've told an amazing story, because it's not about the clothing, it's about the lifestyle, it's about living a fantasy for a lot of people. And so they've created, they don't talk about the products, they talk about being, they bring in the inspiration. Now you can be a part of this Ralph Lauren family. You can, it's a dream, it's a fantasy, it's an inspiration, and that's really good storytelling. So many people today want to focus on, well, let's just tell them about the products we have, the features versus the benefits. Engagement is so critical today, now more than ever, and how you engage is really listening to that consumer. What is important to that person? Ralph Lauren said, wow, I'm creating a fabulous life for myself and my family, and I want other people to have that same feeling when they put on my clothes, when they eat in my restaurant, when they walk into a retail store, Ralph Lauren store. And so everything about that brand is consistent. Same thing with Nike. They've told a phenomenal story over the years. And the reality is you never fail when you take your client or take your customer on that journey. And the best brands do that in a really, really subtle way.
That's awesome. I love it. And that's really high-level advice you've just given, so appreciate that. I think the listeners will benefit from it. And listen to this one again, everybody. There's some nuances to what Renee just said that you may not have caught on the first listen. So that being said, Renee, what is there's some people listening right now, they obviously know you're an expert in what you're doing, 30-plus years in business, have the background from the large advertising side all the way to digital and everything in between. What's the sweet spot? What type of clients do you like working with at the Miller Group?
We like clients who are open to listening, not so much just to us, but to what their consumers are saying about them. They're willing to pivot. They are collaborative. I think it's really important. It's a relationship. And so both parties have to be open. We love to hear their feedback about what we're creating for them. And in turn, we like to share our feedback. And if they're willing and they're open and they're good listeners, I think that makes for a great relationship. So really, that's important to us, having those kinds of clients who are eager and open.
And what about size of company? What's the sweet spot there?
We usually like to work, the funny thing is, Adam, we've worked with companies that are startups, funded startups, all the way to multi-billion-dollar companies. So the reality is it's not so much the size of the account, but the mindset. The companies that truly believe in advertising and truly want outside support are the ones that I think we do really well with.
Fantastic. So Renee, what's the best, if there's some listeners right now that I know fall into those groups, what's the best way for them to reach out and learn more about the Miller Group?
So our website is millergroupmarketing.com, and we're also on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and Insta and all of the other social media platforms. But start off at the website, and then if anyone needs or wants to get a hold of me, they can reach me at Renee, Renee, at millergroupmarketing.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. I have a personal account on LinkedIn as well.
Perfect. Well, hey, Renee, really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing more about your background and all the great work you're doing over at the Miller Group for your clients. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. I hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave me a review on the Apple iTunes store, share this with your friends, your family, your colleagues. I mean, do all those great things we do to support our podcasters. I really do appreciate it. And Renee, thank you for coming on the show.